On the tiny copper globe created in the early 1500s, the coast of Southeast Asia is marked with a message that has become since ironic or iconic. Here be dragons. Though the words themselves were actually quite rare, the sentiment was common among medieval European map makers who often scrawled dragons and sea monsters over terra incognita, which is blank spots on the map. For thousands of years, people all over the world have been made functional maps showing trade routes, settlements, topography, water sources, directions, and what are known as cosmographies, illustrating the Earth and its positions in the cosmos, often including constellations and mythical locations. From the Middle Ages through the mid-17th century, cartographers in Eurasia and North Africa produced a slew of New World maps with features from both these traditions. Often commissioned by rulers and other powerful people, these maps were meant to depict the world's geography, but not necessarily to be used for navigation. And given their makers' incomplete knowledge of the world, they were really hypotheses, some of which have been glaringly disproven. For example, in medieval Europe, the new vogue between with what were known as Mappe Mundi, many of these veered closer to cosmographics, featuring the Garden of Eden or some mythical dragons. They all followed the same format, showing the world's land as one mass divided roughly into the shape of a T and surrounded by a ring of ocean. Islamic map makers also created the world's map in this format, emphasizing geographical details over fantastical elements. One of the earliest and most accurate such maps was created by Ibn Hakal, whose own travels informed his map making. In 1154, the king of Sicily commissioned Islamic mapmaker al-Idrisi to create the Tabula Rogeriana, also known as A Guide to Pleasant Journeys into Faraway Lands. This book of maps included a world map based on Idrisi's own travel and interviews with other traders and travelers. He correctly depicted the world as a flattened sphere, but thought Europe, Asia, and North Africa wrapped all the way around it. The Dal Ming Hunitsu was created in China in 1389 on a piece of silk big enough to fill an entire room. Though the map makers had actually never been to Africa, they attempted to depict the continent based on the accounts of the traders who had been there. Surprisingly, this gave them enough information to create a correctly shaped portrayal of sub-Saharan Africa. Beginning in the 15th century, though, European cartographers began to expand the scope of their world by drawing maps as their explorers traveled the world, but not without missteps, obviously. In 1507, a German cartographer mapped the Americas as a thin silver of land where the east coast would be. Spanish cartographers took a stab at the western side of the Americas based on the accounts from an expedition. Unfortunately, the explorers' impressions of the land led them astray. For over 100 years later, Spanish maps depicted the island of California, detached from the rest of the continent. The Flemish cartographer, best known for his world map, also created a map of the never-before-seen North Pole that was published in 1595. Mercator speculated that the North Pole prominently featured the Rupus nigra, a giant magnetic rock surrounded by a whirlpool that explained why all compasses point north. So even as Europeans built a complete picture of the Earth, they didn't entirely let go of the idea of blank spots filled with mythical beasts. As later of 1657, an English scholar, Peter Hewlin, linked the Australia together with Utopia and a place called Fairyland. But with the exception of the North Pole, these so-called terra incognita weren't really unknown, at least not to the people who lived there. There weren't really any dragons anywhere on the earth, but there were people and cultures, many of them eradicated by those who put their lands on world maps.